You're listening to The Luxury Item, the podcast on the business of luxury and the people and companies that are shaping the future of the luxury industry. Here's your host, Scott Kerr.
For the wealthy, a luxury product is their essential. For aspirational customers, a luxury item is their treat. For one, it is a utility. For the other, a desire. The good news is that equation in a meritorious society is unlikely to change, rain, shine, or virus. Now is not the time for self-doubt. Customers look up to you and your brand as the voice of authority on matters of quality, excellence in service, and aligned values. So hang on to your certitude and conviction. You will bounce back when this scourge is over. Of course, there is no immediate parallel, but this hour of trial brings to mind what they say about surgeons in general. Commonly wrong, but never uncertain. That was an excerpt from an editorial piece titled, "It'll Be Okay." It recently ran in Luxury Daily and was written by my guest on the Luxury Item podcast, Mickey Kahn. Mickey is the founder and editor-in-chief of Luxury Daily, the world's leading luxury business publication. Mickey also founded, edited, and sold Mobile Marketer and Mobile Commerce Daily, two leading trade publications in their space. Prior to that, Mickey was editor-in-chief of eMarketer and DM News. He was also a correspondent for Advertising Age in his early career. Hello, Mickey. How you doing?
Great. Thank you, Scott. Really appreciate the opportunity.
I'm so thrilled to have you on the show during these times. Where are you quarantined these days?
I'm quarantined at home. I live on the Upper East Side, close to the Metropolitan Museum in New York. And it's a very surreal feeling to see my neighborhood completely cleared out. A lot of people have gone to their second homes in the Hamptons or Palm Beach, and they've exported New York's COVID. So, but it's a quiet neighborhood right now. Yeah, I mean, I'm sandwiched between two hospitals, Lenox Hill on 77th Street and Mount Sinai, which is almost close to 100th Street. And at one point, at the height of the coronavirus crisis, all I could hear was sirens from these two hospitals taking patients back and forth. And it was just so awful. It was just an oral reminder of the times we live in. But I see we have fewer sirens now and fewer ambulances passing. So that to me is a positive sign. I think we've seen the worst.
The coronavirus has done major damage to the luxury industry. I don't have to tell you that. It's been through crisis after crisis, disaster after disaster. In the midst of it, we always seem to emerge the same. Each time the industry has emerged into a strong recovery. That excerpt that I took from your love letter, if you will, your piece that you wrote, you said everything's going to be okay. So do you really think it's going to be okay this time?
I do believe in the resilience of mankind. I do believe that, the audience that the luxury market serves is far better insulated than the mass market. As long as their stock portfolios hold up and their businesses are secure, that market is secure. What is at risk is the aspirational luxury market. And that's the aspirational customer who's probably been scared because of this crisis and may cut back on their expenses. But I do feel if luxury brands push a message of quality, of safety, and a familiarity that, people in terms of crisis, they want to go back to things with which they're familiar, then this market is much better prepared to bounce back than mass brands. So I do feel that brands belonging to conglomerates such as LVMH, Richemont, Kering, Swatch, Chanel, Hermes, they're going to emerge much better off than the other brands that are independent, unfortunately, because they've got better balance sheets and they've got more financial reserves, they've got better branding, and they've also got better e-commerce capabilities. So I do feel that luxury will bounce back. The demand will be slightly constrained, but the core product will still be sought after.
Do you think the heritage brands will have a better chance of surviving long term as they always
Yes,
have in the past?
absolutely. And these brands have seen off two world wars. They've seen off the Great Depression. They've seen off the recession. They've seen off, if you're focused on Far East, they've seen off various flus, and they're built for the long term. Their products have enduring strength. So I do feel that heritage brands are not positioned for today or tomorrow, but for the next generation.
Yeah.
If you look at Patek Philippe's branding, I mean, the tagline is, you're merely a custodian for that watch, right? I mean,
Right.
you're taking care of it for the next generation. So if you have that mentality, then you're not, implementing any short-termism in your strategy.
And I know Luxury Daily has been covering the coronavirus pandemic since its impact on the luxury industry, and I think since January when the virus spread and was starting to affect the luxury goods sales in China. So, just in the last 5 months, 4 to 5 months, what about from your perspective on your end? What were some of the biggest lessons that you've learned in covering this over the past 4 months?
Well, I was shocked with the level of compassion of the brands. I mean, I think a lot of people lose sight of the fact that these companies, they repurposed their facilities and factories, and they within a short time they started producing surgical gear, non-surgical gear, face masks, equipment, and they contributed to their local health authorities and to their local communities. I think that's going to be vastly appreciated by the governments and by customers. Uh, and they haven't been, I mean, they've not showed off about that, but we've covered um, pretty much everything that these brands have done. And I can tell you their altruism and their philanthropy will be noticed after this crisis subsides. So I do think that stood out to me, that it was all hands on deck for this crisis. Then the second thing that stood out was the message of optimism from these brands, Gucci in particular, and then you look at pretty much Kering corporate. They've always um, emphasized that you'll see a better tomorrow. So I think that message of hope across social media and email really resonates. It's telling people that this too shall pass. And luxury brands have been very careful about balancing merchandising and marketing with a show of compassion and actual genuine compassion through their deeds. So that thing stood out too, is the messaging was relevant and they were also compassionate. And then, of course, I think the way they handled the crisis itself, Chanel has kept on all its staff, Hermes kept on all its staff, Louis Vuitton and its parent, and then Kering, they've tried to support their staff as much as possible. I think that's very laudable. A lot of non-luxury brands did not hesitate to let go of people within a week of the crisis hitting and lockdowns occurring. So I do feel that the luxury brands took care of their people. Very important, because they're your biggest asset. And
Yeah.
when you return to a sense of normality, I mean, you need these guys to help sell your product or service. So that is the third thing that stood out for me, is caring for your own people. That really stood out. So I say these three things stood out. And now we're seeing this steady um, return to, accepting online orders, and they're saying that, hey, you can call us, we'll deliver, and we'll have white glove service. So we're seeing now more a prevalence of a return to commerce, so to speak.
Yeah, and I would agree that the a lot of these luxury brands rose to the occasion. And the story that really stuck out with me was LVMH. As a branding person, in the early stages of the global outbreak, LVMH donated millions of dollars to the Red Cross of China. And most remarkably, they turned its perfume factories into, sanitizer manufacturers. So to me, that was the perfect example how great brands lead with purpose and not profit.
I 100% agree. And if you've followed what's happened in China, these Chinese aspirational customers and affluent customers are returning to the market. Maybe they won't return to pre-COVID spends, but they've not boycotted any of these brands, and they've repaid their loyalty. So it just shows that if you're a luxury marketer, you have to be highly engaged with your local communities, be highly sensitive to their situation, and not engage in politics. That is very key. Stay clear from politics.
Yeah. And department store chains are facing hurdles like never before during the COVID-19 lockdowns. Neiman Marcus recently filed for bankruptcy, and others are adding to this growing list of retailers that are considering different survival options. So do you think luxury brands will survive without department stores?
Well, let's talk about the stores, the department stores themselves. They were already fragile pre-COVID-19. That model was under stress. Most of their direct clients are brands, and these vendors of theirs have opened monobrand stores in direct competition to the stores, the department stores. So at some point, the chickens were going to come home to roost. So you're competing with the very people who are just 2 blocks down from you. So that model was under stress. And then you have issues of finances and debt. Neiman Marcus has $4.8 billion of debt. And that's because the companies, there's a Canadian pension fund and another private equity group, they bought them and saddled them with this debt.
Right.
And as you know, when people buy these brands, they strip them off their assets, or they try to squeeze as much as possible to get value out of that acquisition. So that's what happened. So I feel that a lot of these department stores will have to right size the number of stores they have, and go back to the old model where you were a little more exclusive. When you come to New York, you look forward, if you're, in the old days, you look forward to going to Bergdorf Goodman, because that was the preeminent department store in New York. Or if you went to Dallas, you went to Neiman Marcus, or Seattle, you went to Nordstrom. So you need to make that destination special again, and not just an amped up version of the mall department store. Now comes the question of their solvency. Mm-hmm. So if some of these guys go bankrupt, will that affect luxury brands? Yes and no. It'll affect the newer luxury brands and those who are looking to crack the market, but it won't affect as much the older, more established luxury brands, because they already have their own retail network and they're already better placed online. So I feel that department stores still serve a very important purpose. It's a one-stop shop. You can pretty much get a curated collection, a selection of products and services. You have a personal relationship with your personal shopper, and it's also a tourist destination. And most important, it's the way you introduce new brands to the market. So I hope that a lot of these brands get their act together. Even if Neiman Marcus goes through its bankruptcy, I'm fairly confident that there'll still be a Neiman Marcus. It might not have the number of stores it does. Same thing with Nordstrom. I believe they're getting rid of 16 stores, but I have faith that if they manage their finances well and they maintain their purpose, they'll survive. But I believe that they should make each store unique, and it should be a destination unto itself, like a Bergdorf or a Le Bon Marche or, Harrods. You need that kind of charm.
In a post-COVID-19 world where when these department stores do start to open up and customers are slowly going back into these stores, they're going to be anxious, anxiety, they're going to be anxious, and they're a different mindset going in. While perhaps in the past they went into these department stores focusing, wanting to get a handbag or a suit or whatever it is, there was this sense of enthusiasm going in. And now going back in, there's always going to be that element of anxiety and social distancing. What do you think the role of department store will be, especially when it comes to customer service?
I think department stores still play a very key role. As I said, they've you've got pretty much a wide selection of products under one roof. Now, the key issue is the anxiety, and I think that just doesn't contain itself to a department store. It's very essential that the shoppers have jobs. Everything is linked to the customer's financial well-being. Because if you're looking at department stores, they've got two or three tiers of customers. They've got the tourists, they've got the locals, and they've got the affluent. The affluent are pretty much used to their personal shoppers, and so that market is a bit insulated. The tourist market is very badly hit, and department stores bank on that market. So that's going to be a hole in the balance sheet there for at least 6 months till tourism returns to Paris and London and New York and Milan and all these places, right? And then you've got the aspirational customers who save up for a Louis Vuitton canvas bag or perfumes, or, they save up. And so when they walk into a department store, what's going to happen right now is they're going to see a highly discounted merchandise, because unfortunately, that's the first thing that department stores do. You're going to see nothing but deals.
Right.
And a lot of luxury brands don't like that.
Yep.
And that is going to be another reason why luxury brands may not, after this crisis over, they may not want to retain their connections to several department stores, because they feel that department stores devalue the value of the brand. So if you're a customer today, the minute these stores open their doors, you go in, because you're going to get the best deals on luxury products for the next 3 to 4 months.
Right.
So the department stores get rid of all their spring, summer merchandise, and even the fall, early fall merchandise. So right now, if you don't have much cash and you're looking for bargains, go and shop department stores online, or in stores when the stores open their doors. So I do feel that you're going to see traffic. They'll just have to run better campaigns online, and just ensure that their customer base is financially okay to come and shop with them.
Speaking of online, the retail world has changed with the pandemic, and we're seeing a lot of luxury brands take stock in their digital strategies and reviewing the role of e-commerce in their business models. So how do you think these brands can drive value for customers when omni-channel support now is probably more important than ever?
I think the one thing that has emerged out of this crisis is the need for brands to pivot more digitally. And I see no reason why they shouldn't do that. Think about Amazon. What was Amazon's revenue last year? Was it $248 billion or was it 298? I forget. I think
lost track.
It was $248 billion last year.
Yeah.
There's no reason why luxury marketers now cannot learn from Amazon and offer a better experience online. This generation, the millennial generation and Gen Z, and even the younger Gen Xers, are very comfortable buying sight unseen. They're trusting, and if they don't like a product, they're very comfortable returning them.
Right.
Right? So if you're worried about familiarity and exclusivity, that's gone out the door when Bernard Arnault created a conglomerate in the 80s and bought all these family brands and basically applied mass market principles to luxury and opened 400 stores for Louis Vuitton, or hundreds of stores for Dior and all that. So these brands don't talk about exclusivity anymore. they're pretty much available to anyone who has money.
Right.
So that obstruction to going digital is basically dead. What they need to do is make sure that they have the level of customer service online that they have in person, which means better call centers. I do feel that this is one area where luxury brands have failed. When you're shopping online, you should have the option to say, hey, I have a question. Click on this and I'll get a live person within a couple of minutes. That is very key, because once you have that option of having a live voice at the other end and you have the merchandise in front of you, the only thing you're lacking is the tactile touch. And if you remove that impediment of having a consultation with someone, you'll see an exponential growth in your sales. So I do feel that this is a fantastic opportunity for luxury brands and retailers to ramp up their e-commerce offerings, to be a little smarter in their email marketing, and to also ensure that their fulfillment centers are well equipped to deliver products within 48 to 72 hours. You have to learn from Amazon. If Amazon can turn into a $248 billion a year brand in 25 years, there's no reason why LVMH can't start their own e-commerce initiative. You know something interesting? 20 years ago, I used to cover luxury. And at that point, LVMH owned a fantastic URL. It was called eluxury.com. And they launched an e-commerce operation in year 2000, and I covered it. And then it bombed, it didn't succeed, and they let that URL expire, and now someone else owns it. Now think about that. LVMH has 75 brands. It's very easy for them to do their own net-a-porter. And you build loyalty to that destination, you can have a fantastic one-stop shop for LVMH. Same thing with Kering, same thing with Richemont. So you have the potential there. And people will buy online now because these 2 months under quarantine have trained people to trust online more, to buy through mobile devices and to buy through computers. So again, circumstances have done what marketing couldn't.
Right.
It basically make acceptable purchases of big ticket items. Now, I don't know, I don't have data if many big ticket items were purchased, but I do know many luxury items were purchased.
And I totally agree about having better call centers, because customers, especially luxury brand customers, when they are shopping online, given these times, I think they're going to want an element of human touch in it and a human voice who represents the brand.
Absolutely right.
You know, the first quarter, for many of these luxury brands and European luxury brands was pretty brutal. And they relied pretty heavily on the Chinese shoppers, which represented like 90% of the luxury growth last year.
Yes.
And it seems like China has turned the corners on these bigger cities, and they're showing cautious optimism. Store traffic and sales are improving for brands like Gucci and Hermes. Chinese consumers still remain the biggest growth opportunity for the luxury sector. So do you think there'll be that same pent-up demand here in the US that will trigger this revenge buying?
I'm not sure. And even with the revenge spending in China, that may taper off a bit. You have to keep in mind that a huge chunk of luxury purchases are made on travel. And the luxury business is heavily reliant on tourism. So as long as borders are closed, you're going to have a problem with the Chinese, because 50% of Chinese consumption of luxury goods and services is through travel and tourism. So if they can't come back to the United States or go to Western Europe or Northern Europe, then that's going to be an issue there. The Chinese market domestically, I think that's going to be strong, as long as the supply chain is able to supply. At some point, Italy and France and the UK have to get back on their feet and start making product for Q4 and next year. So right now, whatever products being sold in China is already in China, right? And
Yep.
when that merchandise is exhausted, you'll have a problem. So my concern is how quickly can these centers of production get back on their feet? You have to allow Italian artisans and factories to start manufacturing, and likewise with the Britons and the French and the Spaniards and even Chinese, because I mean, like it or not, a lot of luxury goods components are made in China and then exported to France and the UK and to Italy and Switzerland. Even, you know, the watchmakers, they make a lot of stuff in China and then they're assembled in their home countries. So China is so deeply connected to the entire luxury ecosystem. You can't just isolate one thing and say that that's going to drive growth there. I think there's another lesson that emerges from this lockdown. One, as I mentioned, is paying more attention to e-commerce. The second thing that luxury brands ought to do is pay more attention to their domestic markets. I think in this rush to satisfy the Chinese market, they've lost sight of the fact that you have to keep Europe and North America and the Middle East happy too. You've got to focus heavily on these markets. If all you're doing is relying on one market to provide 90% of your sales growth, as China did last year, and 20% of your overall industry spend, as China accounts for right now, then you're in trouble if that market is offline. So we're very lucky that China is back on its feet. Can you imagine what would have happened if China was exactly like the US situation and it was completely locked down for 5 months or 6 months? I think luxury brands ought to, if you're a smart luxury brand today and you're in the United States or you're in France, you should think, how do I make sure that I get more French people to buy into my lifestyle, or more neighboring countries to buy in that lifestyle? So in case you have a contagion again and you have issues with travel, long distance travel, you're not beholden to one market for all your sales growth. You don't put your eggs in one basket. And unfortunately, the luxury business has done that.
You know, once the dust settles from all this, there's no question, we're going to face a recessionary market, and the industry landscape is going to undergo dramatic transformation, especially the consumer mindset. Given that, do you see a growing antipathy toward waste-producing business models and heightened expectations for purpose-driven and sustainable brands?
Do I see that? I'm a bit skeptical. We've already seen a steady move towards sustainability, and brands, you've got to give luxury brands that much credit. They've read the tea leaves. Customers have said they want to see more transparency in the supply chain. They expect better practices. But now take a look at what happened with COVID. So we were absolutely on track to get rid of plastic. And now with COVID, plastic is back. Think about that, right? You have to use single-use containers. You can't share. You can't bring your own mugs into Starbucks stores anymore. I don't think these hotels that had planned to get rid of single-use sachets for shampoo will be able to do that anymore. They'll have to reinstate that just for safety's sake.
Right, at least for the time being.
So for the time being, depending on the sector you're in, sustainability will have to take a backseat to safety. And I think when we refer to sustainability, we are referring to waste and want in the fashion business. And you're talking about fast fashion, you're talking about even high-end fashion where you have 12 collections a year. I don't know how that'll stop, because you're asking these big conglomerates to take a haircut and cut the number of collections and the number of products they sell. I don't think they're willing to do that. So if there's any change that has to come, it has to come from the top. And the only 6 or 7 people who can make that decision. It's Mr. Arnault, Bernard Arnault from LVMH.
Mm-hmm.
It's Francois Pinault from Kering. It's Johann Rupert from Richemont. Then you have the brothers who run Chanel, and the Hayeks from Swatch Group. And then you've got, Axel and Pierre Alexis Dumas, and then his cousin Axel Dumas, and all these guys. They have to make that decision. Like, do we go to an older model where we are a little more selective in our product, and we curb the production, and you scale down the model a bit, or do you continue? I think luxury is far too corporatized for it to basically go back to a 1960s model. So that's not going to change.
Yeah.
You're still going to have the same torrent of product out there. What will probably change is the way they produce the product, paying more attention to the sourcing of the materials, the care of the suppliers, and transparency. They'll probably use more technology like blockchain,
Mm-hmm.
and that'll be more prevalent. But if you expect more from the luxury business, no.
McKinsey recently released an insightful report. They were discussing the impact of the crisis on the luxury goods sector. And in that report, McKinsey believed, experiential luxury, which was really one of the most dynamic and fast-growing components of the luxury sector, especially among millennials, will slow down as consumers revert to buying goods over this whole idea of experiences. So do you think that consumers are moving from the idea of being to owning again?
No, I don't think so. Look, I don't want to knock these consultancies, but you can't plan for victory while you're still in the battlefield. You can hope for it, but you can't plan for it. And unfortunately, what they've done, all these consultancies, management consultancies, have come up with all these solutions, and the dust is still not cleared. We don't know how this crisis will impact behavior long term. We just don't. Those who are really affluent, for them, product was always king. It always was, it always will be. It's better to own something and have some tangible product and value in your hand. That's why the jewelry business will always be with us. Hard goods will always be with us. Now, when we talk about experiences, a lot of people allude to experiences and they confuse that for travel and hospitality. Because travel became cheaper, millennials could afford to travel more, plain and simple. And when they traveled more, they bought more, or they ate out more often. Will that change? It depends on the restrictions at these destinations. It depends on the restrictions in airlines. So that's a market that's still taking shape. I don't know if you're going to see a move from, as I said, from being to owning and all that kind of stuff. It's too early right now. I feel that we had never gone totally over to experience. To me, real experience is how you deliver the product. That's plain and simple. Whether you're selling a hard luxury item, or you're selling a hotel bed, or you're selling a restaurant experience. How you deliver that experience and how you make the end customer feel good or better about themselves is real experience. Yeah. That to me is what matters. We should not confuse experience with not owning product. That is not experience.
You were talking about travel before, and you recently ran a piece. You had all these travel experts predicting the future of travel, everything from private travel via member-only vacation and aviation clubs to adventure activities and all these things. So how do you think the luxury travel industry will change? We're already seeing, they're I forgot which cruise line it was. They're ready to open, I think August 1st. But as things open, there's no question, hospitality is going to just is upended essentially, and air
You're
travel.
100% right. Hospitality is upended. So the two sectors that are hardest hit in luxury are retail and hospitality. And we've already discussed retail. Now, with hospitality, you have ways to make the customer feel safe and secure on your premises. So Marriott has come up with its own safety guides and guidelines. And it's very simple. I mean, if you're a hospitality brand, you should be taking this opportunity for the next 2 or 3 months to work with your architects to rejigger your public areas, the lobbies in most hotels and resorts. You should have plexiglass partitions at check-in, uh, at concierge desk. Um, they'll probably remove bar stools from being cheek by jowl, and you're probably going to see tables spread further apart. Very easily implemented, but it comes at a very heavy cost to the bottom line of hotels. So what we don't know is, will the cost of travel go up? Will the cost of hotels go up? Will we go back to the position of the early 70s to mid 70s when the airlines were not deregulated in the United States and airfare was way more expensive than it is now? So that's another issue for aspirational travelers. Will air travel be cheap? Will you be able to do that flight from London to Ibiza or to uh, you know any one of those Spanish islands or to Italy or to France, for a few pounds? Not sure. So if you're a resort, it's very key for you to tap the people who are within driving distance and entice them. And I'd say basically it's a 2 hour driving distance. Anyone who is within a 100-mile radius of your property is your first prospect. And then people who have second homes and they have guest overflows, they come over to your place too. But I do think that the hospitality business can easily implement new safety precautions and have staggered check-ins, contactless key cards. All you have to do is install the app on your phone, and you do not have to go to front desk to get your key card. You
But there's
check
no,
in and check
yeah,
out on your phone.
yeah, there's no question technology is going to have to play a major role in the process for hospitality. How can you use technology to alleviate some of that anxiety that visitors and travelers have, that they're thinking about going in? How could you remove that friction so they're not as anxious? And technology is really going to be the only answer to do that.
Well, it depends on the brand. You have to trust the brand, and that's where the relationship comes into play. If you have a very strong relationship with the Ritz-Carlton brand as a customer, you will trust that the Ritz-Carlton is doing right by you. And the same thing applies with the Four Seasons or the Fairmont or the Dorchester or any number of groups out there, or the Aman Hotels group. So the number one thing is, how strong is your relationship to your customer if you're the brand? And then you convey your measures and what you're doing to keep that customer safe on your property to that customer. That's number one. Number two, you're talking about the airline, or you're talking about the ship, or you're talking about whatever transportation they're taking. They have to reassure that customer again that you won't catch this virus en route. But if you're talking about anxiety, if they were really that anxious, they would not book that trip and they would not board that flight. So the high level of anxiety that they have is at the starting point, and by the time they come to the actual venue, there's just a little residual anxiety there, and that's when front desk comes into play, signage comes into play, and practice comes into play. So if you walk into a Ritz-Carlton after this crisis, and when you walk to front desk, someone should hand you a booklet or something, or point you to a section on the app saying that just look to see what we are doing to keep you safe once you're in the room, right? With with room service, right? If you don't want to eat in the restaurant, we'll make room service better. Uh, Housekeeping. How do you ensure that housekeeping is safe for you? How do you ensure that the room is clear of germs and that you don't have to worry about the previous guest in the room, right? All those measures have to be very clearly spelled out, and that will require, you're going to see very soon these hotels and hospitality groups and cruise ships come out with materials reassuring their customers of the steps they've taken. Then independent bodies and local governments or those with jurisdiction will have to do audits on in these venues, just like how you have audits in restaurants, right? You have these sudden inspections. You're going to have inspections of these facilities, and they'll have to give a certificate saying that, all right, they're complying. But it boils down to trust, and it boils down to really implementing these safety measures and then conveying that knowledge to your customer or prospect.
I want to take a little turn here and talk about influencers. And in recent years, these lifestyle influencers have really emerged to a class of their own. They have to connect to their followers and part of the current zeitgeist. With COVID-19 dominating the public life, and that's really become harder for these influencers to do. So do you think the coronavirus will kill the whole idea of influencer culture?
Now, when you talk about influencers, I mean, are you talking about brand spokespeople? Are you talking about people who've gotten famous by getting...
More social media influencers.
It depends on how well they've stayed connected and authentic, I mean, with my problem with influencers was the fine print that they never disclosed till various governments forced them to make it quite transparent that they were paid to pitch and so pay to play. So as long as people understand that connection, they've got a business because they reach audiences. The unfortunate downside to this virus, and it also predates this, is that the media industry around the world is very weakened. And this virus has done no favors. I've been in media for 27 years, and I can tell you this is the worst it's ever been. And we don't know if in 5 to 10 years you'll have an independent media environment. You might have the New York Times and the Condé Nast surviving here and there, but you don't have small independent media brands without any advertising support or subscriptions. And again, each time you have a crisis like this, both streams of revenue take a knock, not to mention the loss of an events stream of revenue. You can't even host an event now. So that's where influencers come into play, is because they have basically taken over the role of media. And very often they have far bigger followings than a Condé Nast or Hearst magazine. Mm-hmm. Question is, how credible are they, and will their audience trust them going forward? I don't see a reason for them not to. So I think the influencer market will continue to survive, and it may even thrive. And that's especially the case in China. The key opinion leaders in China are the driving force for a lot of luxury brand sales.
You talked about events before, and virtual events have become the new normal. Fashion weeks and trade shows have completely been reimagined, and many brands who rely on live events or conferences have either canceled them or pushed them to later in the year, or pivoted to some kind of virtual alternative. And I know Luxury Daily has a lot of amazing events. How are you handling the conferences for now that you can talk about?
That is a major challenge for us, because we've always done webinars. We've done webinars for 10 years now, and we've had a great reception. We do them for an hour, and it's free to the readers. Now, you've got to take a conference that's typically 8 hours and bring it online. and keep the readers or the viewers' connection and attention for 8 hours online. I don't know how that'll translate. Number two is the business model itself. Will people pay to listen to speakers and view them online? I already see quite a few companies doing that, so that may not be that much of a hurdle, but the question is price. How do you price it? What you lose is networking, face-to-face networking.
Yep.
And that is going to be a casualty. And so when you price a conference online, you've got to price it accordingly to reflect the fact that the networking component is gone. And you can have a side-by-side component where you can connect people, like everyone has access to email addresses with you create a LinkedIn group, which is what we're going to do for conferences. But we're just waiting to see what others are doing as well. Now, we do have a Women in Luxury conference coming up, and New York has just said that, I mean, not New York, but the venue that we have, the UBS building, they told us we can't even host our conference in July anymore.
Wow.
We were supposed to host it in April, couldn't do that. We moved it to June, couldn't do that. And now we can't host it in July. And they've closed their facilities through end of August. Now, I can't wait to the end of August
to
host our conference. So willy-nilly, we'll bring it online. And I hope to God that, it succeeds, because if that succeeds, then that opens up a new stream of revenue for us, where we can basically put on more conferences, and it'll be available worldwide to people to listen.
Right.
And it'll be a lower registration fee, but we won't have to worry about, keeping people 6 feet away from each other, hand sanitation stuff, and the food and all the kind of. I mean, don't forget, this is going to be another issue, right? You go to a conference. Most of these conferences have buffets, and Luxury Daily's conferences were always boxed lunches. And over the years, I insisted, whenever we had these events, I said, I do not like cold, open salads and food just lying around, because people sneeze. So here's the funny thing.
You were ahead of your time.
6 months ago, 6 months ago, UBS, where we host our events in New York, they came up with a policy. It was part of the sustainability policy that we are not going to use plastic or paper anymore. So I got word from our caterers, sorry, everyone has to use china and forks and knives. I said, but it's not sanitary. They said, no, we can't do anything about it. Well, guess what? Boxed lunches are back. So we all have to adapt. We all have to adapt. At the end of the day, I'm fairly confident there is a place for in-person conferences. We human beings are social. We do need to see each other. While we may not need to see each other as often now for meetings and making decisions, but we do need to see each other for prospecting and for building relationships or making them stronger. So I do feel smaller events like ours, we limit our events to 100 to 125 people. We've never gone beyond that. There is a room for that. And it's easy to enforce the social distancing there and keep all the precautions in place. But when you're dealing with 4,000 to 5,000 people in one venue, I think there'll be a lot of anxiety even through the end of the year.
Yeah, I would agree.
You just don't know who's carrying what.
So my final question before I ask you the luxury item question is really asking you to kind of look into the future is, what will the luxury industry's greatest challenge be in the next 5 years? And where do you think the luxury industry should focus?
So let's take your first part of the question. What's the challenge for the next 5 years? I think what we've learned is, we never factored in pandemics in our playbook.
Nope.
No business did,
that wasn't
right?
Part of the bingo card.
It wasn't part of the bingo card. So I think now that gets thrown into the mix when you buy insurance. And so China has had fantastic practice with this. They had the SARS epidemic, 2003, and then they had MERS, they had swine flu. That economy is used to handling shocks of the scale and bouncing back. The West is not. The West has had relative calm since 1945. No wars on their lands and no aggression, bar the few communist takeovers and all that. So now your 5 year plan has to include highly unpleasant surprises from left field. So this is just one. If you remember a few years ago, uh, there was a volcanic eruption in Iceland, and it stopped travel in the Western Hemisphere.
Yep, I remember that.
Right? Planes couldn't go through those clouds because your engine would stop. Now think about that. If you have another volcanic explosion in the next 2 years, travel is affected again. Borders shut. So luxury brands have to be prepared to see borders shut again in the next 5 years. That is one thing they have to factor in, which means that they have to be well prepared to service their customer cross-border, even if the borders are physically shut. And you need to have redundancy there, built-in redundancy. You also need to make sure that you service your local market better. If Louis Vuitton is in the United States, make sure that at least 50% of your sales or 60% of your sales comes from the US market and the rest through travel. You see, don't expose yourself to travel as much.
Right.
That is another thing. The third challenge I see is a move to this is probably going to happen as time passes, is to buy less. And you're seeing that with millennials. If you look at their furniture, in their residences, they don't have as much stuff as baby boomers did. They don't have china cabinets. They don't believe in buying baubles as much. So they buy less, but they buy better.
Yes, live large and carry little, as they say.
Yes, exactly. So I think the challenge for luxury brands is to sell less, but sell better. To convey the message that you can buy less, but buy better quality. So they've got to emphasize the message of quality.
That's
very, very important. At the end of the day, as a luxury brand, you're the maker of a very high quality product or a purveyor of extremely high quality service. And that's it.
You know, given that, I think that's a big challenge to the fast fashion business, who's really never relied on that.
That will change. But again, you can't mandate fast fashion to stop. Demand, the market speaks. You can't, when the market speaks, that market drops. So as long as there's a market for fast fashion and customers buy, that market will survive. But when you're talking about high luxury, I think you're going to see a rationalization there. You're going to see, don't forget, there was nothing broken with the luxury world till this lockdown. Everyone comes up with all these nostrums and all these solutions. And sometimes I'm sick of it because guess what? The luxury industry went gangbusters last year.
Yeah.
They came off a fantastic year.
Right.
They're projected to have another fantastic year. Yes, you had issues with some sectors here, and the hospitality sector was slated to have fantastic growth.
There was so much optimism.
Yeah. So whatever has happened to the luxury business is not of their own doing. It's because the world has been induced into coma by governments looking to protect their people. And the unfortunate fallout of that is business suffers because customers don't have access to product by walking into a physical premises. And that's pretty much what it is. So that is the problem with luxury, that your customers couldn't have access to your points of sale. So there isn't much broken about luxury. Fashion has its own problem there with fast fashion, but that's partly the lower end of luxury or even non-luxury. That's a different market. So I don't see that as a problem, but what I do see is Gen Z, millennials, younger Gen X, they're not buying as much product. They're buying better, but they're buying less. So I think luxury brands have to emphasize that message and reorient their product to emphasize those values. That is where they have to move. And in terms of focus, I mean, I've already combined focus with the
Yeah,
challenge.
you're right. Exactly.
But I think if you have to boil it down, be more digital, emphasize your quality, and stay in touch and align yourself with your customer values. If you do these three, luxury is already 90% there in 5 years.
So my final question, the luxury item question, which I ask all my guests. So if you were stranded on a desert island and could only have one luxury item with you, what would that luxury item be? It can't be a form of transportation, obviously, and can't require anything that has mobile service or even have mobile service itself. So what would that one luxury item be, Mickey?
Does the island have a beach?
It has a beach. It's a deserted island, and it's maybe has 3 palm trees and a beach and a couple of coconuts.
And if I'm shipwrecked, I mean, is it just my clothes and that's it?
That's it.
Okay, that means.
But you have one luxury item.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd stick with my Loro Piana scarf. You know, I mean,
multi-purpose. It probably has multi-purpose.
Exactly. I could use one of the 3 palm trees if things got really bad, and you know.
And if someone comes to the island, you'll have something. You'll have a mask.
Yes. But you know, I really love the feel of my Loro Piana scarf. That to me is real luxury. It's the finest wool you'll ever find. It's durable. It's not scratchy. It's soft. It's just the right length. And I feel extremely comfortable and gives me a sense of security. So if I'm stranded on a desert island and I know no one's going to rescue me, might as well live the last days out with a sense of comfort and luxury, and knowing that, you know, the thing that touches me is the thing I love the most materially. Obviously, you know, you could ask for a watch, but who's keeping track of time?
Mickey, thank you so much. You've been an amazing guest. I really enjoyed our conversation, and stay well, stay in, stay sane, and stay safe. And we'll be talking soon.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Scott. And it was a real pleasure talking to you, and be safe.
That's it for this episode of the Luxury Item Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this useful and entertaining, I would be really grateful if you can share it with a friend or colleague. I would love it if you subscribe so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, be sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It really helps other listeners find us. The Luxury Item Podcast is a production of Silvertone Consulting. I'm your host, Scott Kerr. Until next time.